We accept the reality of the world with which we're presented. It's as simple as that.
We no longer live in a world of nations and ideologies, Mr. Beale. The world is a business, Mr. Beale.
Go on without me. Just go.
A good soldier never leaves a man behind.
Because I wouldn't give you 2 cents for all your fancy rules if behind them they didn't have a little bit of plain, ordinary, everyday kindness.
Life, finds a way.
Welcome to Silver Screen Biases. Each week we pick a movie off of IMDb's Top 250 and dig into it. We're examining truth claims and critically acclaimed movies while also examining our own biases. I'm Nelson.
This is Jeff.
And this week, we're covering what year was this movie coming out?
1954.
Thank you. 1954 Marlon Brando breakout hit, On the Waterfront. He'd done a little bit of work before this, but this was the one that really put him on the map. He'd actually, so it's kind of funny to say, he had gotten awards prior to this, Academy Awards prior to this.
For one specific thing or for a couple?
Yeah, a different movie that came out shortly before it. Kind of a big deal, and I'm blanking on it right now. Let me pull that up. Hold on. Yeah, so his real big breakout, and I know you'll know the name of this film, A Streetcar Named Desire.
Yes, okay, that was before, you're right.
But despite being kind of like this Hollywood juggernaut, after this, he went for like a decade of like not a whole lot coming out until eventually The Godfather. But this is one of the movies that really he's super well known for, which I discovered while watching it because there's a line in this movie that I've always thought was in The Godfather that's actually in this movie.
What line was that? Because you mentioned, okay, so you and I talked, you had seen the movie, we got together before recording this episode. I had still not watched the film yet. And you'd said this. I didn't recognize any lines. I've also not seen The Godfather. So there's a couple like, I'm picking it off, like there's a couple of those things.
Yeah.
I didn't hear any of that.
Right.
What lines were you talking about? Because I didn't catch it.
I've also never seen The Godfather, which will probably surprise audiences. We have that planned for later this year with a really great guest for that.
Yes, we do.
But there's a line in this movie that I've always thought was in The Godfather, which is when he's talking to his brother right before his brother dies. And he says to his brother, I had class. I could have been a contender. I could have been somebody, not a bum.
Okay, you thought that was The Godfather.
I've always thought that was The Godfather.
You knew it was Marlon Brando.
Yeah.
You had connected that, okay, but just much older Marlon Brando.
I could have been a contender.
Yeah. Okay, so you hadn't seen this movie before going into this?
Nope.
No, me neither. Do you want me to do stats, or do you want to just talk about our overall perception of the movie?
Actually, I want to take an unusual detour first.
I love this.
There's a podcast that I really like.
Okay.
We've talked about it before. I've referenced them a few times. World's Greatest Con. Brian Brushwood.
Yes.
Excellent production.
Yep.
In fact, you might remember this, Jeff. A couple months ago now, we were talking about the importance of our audience sharing our content with other people if they like it.
Right.
And I told you how I'd listened to a podcast and they said, if you like this, call a friend. And you said, did you do that? And I said, no, it was World's Greatest Con. World's Greatest Con Season 1 is all about this incredible con that they pulled on Hitler.
This actually happened.
Really happened.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
You got to check it out.
Okay.
Season 2 is more like an anthology where each episode is a different con, all strung together with a common theme.
Oh, okay.
And then season 3 is about like
Carnival.
no,
no.
It's about in the 60s through the 90s, the paranormal Geller who would bend spoons and stuff.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Anyway, season 2, episode 1. Linked below, 21 and the 1950s quiz show scandals. In the 50s, we saw the rise of quiz shows, and not just quiz shows, but game shows.
Game shows, yeah.
And one of those quiz shows was called 21.
Yes, I'm familiar with that one.
Basically, the aim of it was one of the early trivia shows. Dan Enright was at least one of the producers, and he had tried and failed to get a lot of different game shows off the ground. And then finally got a success with 21. Herb Stempel was watching.
It's a strong name.
It's a great name. And he's watching, and he's like, I bet I can do this. Okay, so he mails Enright and says, I'd like to give this a shot. And so they send him a qualifying trivia test. Takes 3.5 hours.
Holy cow.
363 questions. He got 251 of them right. So they brought him on the show.
Yeah.
But here's the kicker. Dan Enright knew that what he really needed for this show to be a success, an inside man of sorts. Even though Herb Semple, in his own right, could have done well in the show,
Succeeded.
Dan Enright was giving him the answers.
Why?
Because by having one contestant... Oh, sorry, and something that really set 21 apart is that if you won, you get to come back next week.
Be a continuous guest.
That's right.
Yeah.
So they made headlines with this guy that just like, he's a wizard. Well, eventually, Dan Enright gets tired of Herb Semple, wants to replace him with a new candidate he's found. This guy's like an Ivy League from a very pedigreed family, handsome, decorated military guy. He's the perfect new inside man.
Mm-hmm.
And Herb Semple is told that he's going to have to take a dive, and he doesn't want to.
Oh, no. Is this all like... Okay, please tell me something this is caught on camera. Like, is there a fallout that was on screen or something?
So Dan Enright says to Herb Semple, we've got your replacement lined up. We're going to give you a nice severance package. And the question you're going to get wrong in 1956, the question you're going to get wrong is, what motion picture won the Academy Award for 1955? And Herb Semple says, quote, I knew that the answer was Marty. But Dan Enright specifically wanted me to miss that question. This hurt me very deeply because this was one of my favorite pictures of all time, and I could never forget this. A few seconds before that, as I was trying to come up with the answer, I could have changed my mind. I could have said the answer is Marty instead of On the Waterfront. On the Waterfront was the answer that he was supposed to give and said, which he did. He followed through with it. But this eventually devolves into some chaos. I strongly recommend people go and listen to that episode again, linked below.
The Greatest Con?
The World's Greatest Con. Season 2, Episode 1, linked below.
And if any of you guys are listening, we'd love to have you on the episode.
Yeah, I mean, Brian Brushwood, I'm a huge fan. Been a fan a long time. You're way out of our league, and we'd love to have you.
We'll treat you real nice.
Yeah. Put you up in a 2-star hotel.
Yeah. And that just means there's going to be stars in your hotel room.
Yeah, stuck to the ceiling.
Because there's
those glow-in-the-dark stars.
No roof.
It's just going to be my son's bedroom.
Yes. That's fascinating. I'm fascinated by cons. Like movies like Italian Job, the Ocean's trilogy. Oh, even now there's Ocean's 8. The one with didn't Eddie Murphy, the hotel heist or something, like the one where he was in
Tower Heist.
Tower Heist. That one was great.
Logan Lucky.
That was the one I was just thinking
I love
about.
a good heist.
Yeah, like that, man, heists are good. So yeah, I need to listen to this con thing.
It's great. You're going to love it.
I'll have to get into that. Yeah. I'm
the
very
world's
intrigued by that.
greatest con.
So you had never seen this movie going into it?
No.
Okay.
And the only thing I knew about it was that it was connected to Herb Semple.
Okay.
That was literally all I knew about this movie.
For this one, I did watch a quote unquote trailer for it on YouTube.
Yeah.
It was more of like a press release than anything because the movie was already out and it was more just saying, it was almost like a sizzle reel.
Okay.
And off the bat, I was intrigued. Like compared to some other movies in this area of time, I was a little bit more like, okay, this story sounds interesting. Like I'm intrigued by this. Like, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the movie.
Yeah.
It was dry in moments. It was soundtrack was to be argued with, but I didn't mind this movie. What'd you think?
I really liked it a lot.
Yeah, Marlon Brando's he's a believable, he's a good actor,
and he's also he's the first of the great method actors.
Mm-hmm.
Which I'll link it below, and I'm going to show you after this so that you can appreciate it too. Ian McKellen did a hilarious thing about method acting where it was a sketch. Somebody asked him if he's a method actor, and he's like, No, I do this thing where I pretend to be the character. I'm not actually Gandalf.
Yes. On the Waterfront, 1954. It ran, depending on where you look, it's about an hour and 48 minutes. Mm-hmm. Directed by Elia Kazan. And this rating, just kind of like we've seen the last couple ones, is approved.
I approve as well.
Yeah. Notable cast. Marlon Brando is obviously the big one.
Yeah.
And later, so you had already mentioned, what was the movie you talked about?
Marty?
No, the one before that.
Streetcar Named Desire.
Streetcar Named Desire. It's all. But after this movie, after a little bit of a gap of duds, he was in Superman.
Yes.
Superman 2.
He was Zod, right?
Apocalypse Now, and then ended up being in the Godfather series as Don Corleone.
Cheadle. Yeah.
Don Cheadle. Yes, he played Don Cheadle in the Godfather series. Yeah, which I've seen none of those.
Yeah. I've never seen
So
it.
this was my first Marlon Brando movie.
I've never seen The Godfather.
Yeah, I've never seen the Supermans. Yeah. I hate admitting that, but I've never seen the original Supermans.
Yeah. I've only seen the clip where he flies backwards around the world and
Right. I've seen stuff like I've seen Christopher Reeves in the suit and stuff like.
right.
I'm familiar with it, but I've never seen him. Another notable cast member is someone I'm not specifically familiar with, but he crosses over in the two movies that you and I have talked about. One we've talked about, one we will talk about.
Okay.
Lee J. Cobb. He plays the character.
Inventor of the Cobb salad.
Lee J. Cobb. He played Johnny Friendly. He was in The Exorcist.
Was he?
Yes. I can tell you who if you're interested.
I am.
All right, let me bring
Because
this up.
The Exorcist is in my notes.
Okay.
This
All right,
is-
let me bring this up here. He was in The Exorcist. He played Lieutenant Kinderman. I don't recognize the character. I don't remember it.
Yeah.
But he was in The Exorcist. And then he's also in 12 Angry Men, which is coming up for us eventually.
Eventually, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not familiar with him, but I saw that he had two notable movies. And then the third name I just wanted to mention, and I'm curious if you have any insight in. Leif Erikson.
So he's also in my notes.
Like I know that name from one place.
Happy Leif Erikson Day.
SpongeBob SquarePants.
All
Like,
right.
when I read that, I'm like, what? Like, what's the importance of him?
Okay, so there.
Can you explain this?
Yeah.
Okay.
The Leif Erikson in this movie, decorated war hero and actor.
Who played the character Glover
That's right.
in On the Waterfront?
That's right. Leif Erikson of SpongeBob SquarePants Happy Leif Erikson Day fame
Yes, was a Viking.
was a
right?
Viking
Okay.
and is presumed to be the first European to have visited North America.
Okay.
So
So unrelated.
likely,
Well, maybe related, but
plausibly related.
Not the same person.
Their last name is spelt differently,
Okay.
but I mean, not that counts for much because Leif Erikson the Viking wouldn't have used English letters to
Right.
write his name.
So I just saw that name as I'm going through the information of this movie. I was like, is that the same one SpongeBob's referencing?
Yeah. So
and it's not.
formal petition that every Leif Erikson Day people should watch On the Waterfront. That would be every October 9th.
October 9th.
People should watch On the Waterfront in commemoration of Vikings visiting North America.
This movie is super Viking forward.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And then the reason that The Exorcist was in my notes is
Yeah, what you
because
got?
this is the most Catholic movie since The Exorcist that we've seen.
Right. Yeah, I was going to bring up some of the faith elements later
Yeah.
that I had in my notes. Yeah.
This was done in Hoboken, New Jersey.
Excuse me?
This movie takes place in and was filmed in Hoboken, New Jersey.
That does not sound like a real place.
But The Exorcist was done in...
Sheboygan? I just feel like we're making up city names now, Nelson.
Before I moved to Ohio, I thought Toledo was somewhere in like India.
It might as well be. To all of our Toledo listeners, I'm sorry.
I'm not.
8.1
Yeah.
out of 10 on the IMDb scale. It stands, as of recording this episode, it stands as at 186 on the IMDb Top 250, 99% on the tomato meter,
Yeah.
and 95% audience. Not bad merits.
In 1996, when IMDb first came out, it debuted at 226.
Okay.
It dropped to 250 almost immediately.
Oh, wow. So almost fell off.
Yeah. And then it rallied to 66 by August 99.
66.
And it held around there for 6 years and slowly descended since. And for whatever reason, in fall of 2019, there was a significant drop. It dropped like 10 or 15 points.
Fascinating.
No shared cast or crew
With Clockwork.
with A Clockwork Orange. So, let's get this out of the way early. What are some thematic similarities that you've drawn between the two movies?
A group of people willing to do harm to get things done in the way that they would like it to be done. Like in both movies, there's a group of characters that are willing to do whatever it takes to get something to move in the direction they want it to move in. Thugs, whether they're thugs, gangsters, there's just a couple of people that are willing to get their hands dirty, rough up some people in order to get something that benefits them. So that's very vague, but
Yeah.
there's this gang mentality in both movies.
Yeah, and violence as a tool.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In Clockwork Orange, violence is also a means to itself, an end unto itself. Whereas, and we'll get into this later with Mafia, they're providing violence as a service to a different end. And then I think that's really about another is betrayal of people that are within your criminal element.
Mm-hmm.
We saw that in Clockwork Orange, where they turn on Alex DeLarge, and then we saw that in this movie where they turn on Charlie.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's off the cuff. I wasn't prepared for that question, but off the cuff, that's the biggest thing I could like. Just this gang in the streets type of ruthlessness and stuff. What about you? Was there anything like?
No, that's about all I had too. And then you and I have been talking off air about a couple of the questions.
We don't want you listeners to think that we're friends.
No,
don't get the
only
idea
reason
that
we were hanging out yesterday is because we were doing a different podcast.
That's right.
Linked below. We were guests on the Things We Say. But you and I were talking about a couple different questions that we're going to add to our workflow for this.
Yes.
This is based on a book called On The Waterfront.
Wow.
Yeah, so first question.
See the connection.
First of the new questions. Was it based on a book? Yes, it was.
That's awesome.
And then the other question, inspired by Family Guy and their...
Oh, yes.
Does, at any point in the movie, does a character in the movie say the name of the movie?
I don't...
Several times.
Okay.
Several different characters.
I know
say
Waterfront's mentioned.
Several different characters say "On the Waterfront" within the context of the movie.
Okay, that's fantastic. I know the word Waterfront's been mentioned. I didn't know. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
They said the thing.
He said it. I'll stop you, Zod, or I'm not Superman 2, Return of Superman.
Do you have budget for this movie?
I do. I do.
Do you have the inflation rate as well?
Oh boy, do I!
Yeah, let me have it.
All right, so estimated $910,000.
Okay, just under $1 million.
Yeah, in 1954.
Mm-hmm.
Throw a number out there. Percent inflation since 1954.
76.
Higher.
77. 80. 84.
4 digits.
84 digits.
1,034%.
I'm bad at this game. So 1,000. So 100 million? No, I'm 10 million.
10.3.
10.3 million.
Yeah.
That's still, it's not a lot of money in today's a movie.
No, and they filmed this in 30 days.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's not surprising. There's a lot of, the CGI is minimal, like it's,
There's like 3 locations.
Yeah. No, that's plausible. I do know that Marlon Brando did not do any scenes after 6 p.m.
Yeah.
Before filming this, he had recently lost a family member. I believe it was his mother.
Okay.
And he wanted in his contract to where filming would not go past 6 p.m. for him. And he had many evenings where he would leave set and go visit a therapist and talk with
There's at
work
least
through
one
personal
scene.
stuff.
There's
a taxi cab that's at night, but.
And then when Charlie's shot, he's running through the alley at night.
Yeah.
Also,
I'm not. That's just what I discovered. Maybe he did a couple scenes, but
Marlon Brando was an eccentric, to put it politely.
Hmm.
We started with the whole inflation thing way back with Psycho because we wanted to contextualize money being talked about in the movies,
right?
And then that just carried over to talking about their budgets. To give some context of money in this movie, at one point, Father Barry talks about the mobsters on the waterfront, saying that they're in $150 suits. That's an incredibly affordable suit today.
Yeah, I could muster that.
These would be $2,000 suits.
I could not muster that. But if you donate now to Jeff's personal fund, I could get a $2,000 suit.
Jeff's empty pocket fund.
That's right.
And then when Charlie's trying to get... What's Marlon Brando's character's name?
Terry Malloy.
Yeah. So Charlie's trying to get Terry to join the mafia in that taxi ride. And he offers him a position. He says it's not going to take any kind of work. You're going to get a few cents off of every pound that comes through. Every 100 pounds that comes through, that's $200, $300, $400 a week. That works out to $2,500 to $4,500 a week. So that's comfortable living.
Mm-hmm. Not too shabby.
Not too shabby-doo.
Man, this movie had a lot of birds.
Yes.
A lot of birds.
Canaries, pigeons.
I'm pulling this straight from IMDb.
Hawks.
Yeah. So this is coming straight from IMDb, citing my source here. But I thought this is something that we could maybe discuss a little bit. and I'm reading from IMDb, and then we'll break it down here. So, hawks versus pigeons. This entire movie is a battle of John Friendly's hawks versus the dock workers' pigeons. The beginning scene where Joey gets pushed off the roof. The hawks, are in the rooftop waiting for their prey. Joey, the pigeon, Terry runs with the hawks, but is a pigeon on the onset. After reading that little note, I immediately kind of got like Sharks and Jets types of vibes, just from that like gang mentality, or just like the haves versus the have-nots, or the people that think that they can control things even if they shouldn't be in a place of power, versus the people that don't have power that are willing to just kind of be walked over or just manipulated, like that type of vibe. Like, that was the first initial thing I got. And then after reading that thing off the IMDb, I was like, okay, yeah, like I liked how they brought the birds into it and just represent like predator and prey type of thing. Cause hawks eat pigeons. Outside of like being in high school and experiencing, like, I was lucky enough that I didn't experience too much bullying as a kid, and obviously like there's no good need for bullying. Like bullying is bad. That wasn't something I was familiar with back in the day. I've never experienced a gang mentality type of thing, like to see that on the screen. Like I know it happens. I know it has happened. I know the mafia, the mob, those are all real things. But in Jeff's life, I don't think I've ever experienced something like that where I've gone up against or been put up against the wall from like with a mob mentality. It's just like, it's not necessarily a bias, but like, is there something like maybe I'm not thinking of like, is that something that people experience a lot? Like mob mentality? So like, and not necessarily in the street violence, but just, it can look different ways. But like, is that mob mentality something that's prevalent still in Western civilization here in the United States and America outside of maybe the school playground?
Yes.
Okay.
Very, very common. People look at FBI crime statistics and incorrectly draw the conclusion that it's racially, not even racially motivated, but racially based. Black on black crime in America is a huge problem. Mm-hmm. But it's not a race thing. Black people are not genetically predisposed to be criminals. It is a socioeconomic thing. And Thomas Sowell, Sowell, has written a lot about this. He kind of tracked how when the white community in America really moved out of lower class into middle class, a lot of our criminal element kind of disappeared after the civil rights into Reconstruction. And because of how a lot of things were really mishandled there, the black community now is kind of the hotbed for criminal activity.
Right.
But if we look at waves of immigration through U.S. history, when the Irish came over, the Irish were the bottom of the totem pole, and they had a lot of issues with crime. The Italians as well, the Jewish population. Interestingly, a lot of the Scandinavians who settled in the Midwest kind of skipped that somehow. Latin American population. One of the biggest reasons for this is that it's like territory dispute type things. And you might wonder kind of like, well, why are they having disputes over territory in the first place?
Right.
The way organized crime typically evolves, in American history anyway, is you have a group of people all living in the same area who share culture from a different place. Okay, like the Sicilians all come over and they're living in Little Italy and they're facing persecution by the Protestant European descendants in New York, for example. And so to protect themselves, the stronger men in the community start patrolling their own neighborhoods and providing violence as a service. They're providing security because the police aren't doing a adequate enough job. Whether it's malicious or incompetence, there's room for debate there.
Right.
But after you secure your position as the organization that provides security within an area, there's a lot of incentive to protect that. Violence as a service, which is what security is, any service deserves compensation.
Right.
And so people start paying what's called this often evolves into what's called a protection racket. The protection rackets often, but not always, are extortive, where they'll come and they'll smash up your shop if you don't pay your dues. However, let's say another organization, another group is also providing a protection racket, and they come in and smash up your shop. You say to the people that are supposed to be protecting you, that you pay to protect you, hey, if you can't protect me from them, I'm going to pay them instead. And that's where we have these turf wars evolve.
Right.
As we saw with the prohibition of alcohol in the 20s, when you prohibit a good or service that people still desire or need, it doesn't cease to exist. It just becomes more dangerous. Black markets simply are more dangerous.
Right.
You know, Al Capone, alcohol was just one of the many services he provided.
Right.
And when they made that legitimate, when the prohibition was removed and alcohol sales became legitimate again, well, no longer was it the toughest guy in town that was making beer, right? If you look at a lot of brewers today, they're like nerdy hipsters.
Yep.
And we've seen the same thing with the drug war. And that's what these protection rackets are as well. It's just the state, through policing, is not providing an adequate enough protection service. And so these organizations, organized crime, are providing a legitimately desired service, but because they're not providing it legitimately, it comes with all of the violence and other issues that illegitimacy brings.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, people that are engaging in any one given crime are willing to engage in other crimes.
Right.
So that's where we then have prostitution, numbers, racketeering, and more than anything, the government just doesn't want competition, right? They outlawed running numbers, and then they introduced the lottery.
Okay. Right numbers, is that gambling?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you have a bookie for sports,
Okay.
they're running numbers. Peaky Blinders, it's all about numbers.
Gotcha.
That's what the term for that.
Cillian Murphy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're gonna see plenty of him this Sunday, aren't we?
Yeah.
Jeff and I are gonna go see Oppenheimer.
Date night. Okay. Does it happen the same? Okay, like, and I feel like this is going to come up again, especially when we get into the Godfather movies and stuff like that. Like, and even the Batman, the Dark Knight series, like you see a lot of that with Gotham and stuff. Like, it's like this happens a lot in movies.
So what we see in Gotham there is Joker trying to unite the different organizations, and when several groups who are in the same industry work together to box out a competitor, that's called a cartel. Okay.
Not the band from the early 2000s.
No, they're a cartel. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Gotcha. Okay.
So for example, in Hoboken, New Jersey in the 50s, the organized crime that was running the dominant one was the Genovese family, which was one of the 5 families that ran New York.
The 5 families.
That's right. And that's the 5 families were a cartel of 5 different Italian families that were killing each other until Lucky Luciano united the 5 families to bring some order to the chaos.
Did you ever watch Boy Meets World?
Yes.
Did you ever see the episode where Sean got involved with those 2 old guys at the pizza shop and he was delivering packages for him? You never, like, it does, it's obviously it was a sitcom, but like they alluded to the fact that like they were doing some dangerous stuff and Sean found a good way to make money. But like I just picture just 2 guys sitting behind a table eating pasta. Boy, you want to earn an easy buck, you know, like just stuff like that. Like
well, so
I just everything I know about mobs I've learned from Boy Meets World and The Dark Knight.
The reason that there's that trope that mafia work through these legitimate businesses like restaurants.
Oh, okay.
One, they need to launder the money. They need to make the money legitimate, and so you pass that through a legitimate organization.
Then it's legal, yeah, or quote unquote legal.
It's
hard to trace after that. Yeah.
The other reason it often is restaurants is because first generation immigrants open restaurants because they're serving a community of people that they're finding a market desire, right? All the Sicilians want Sicilian food. Who better to provide Sicilian food than Sicilians? So they open a Sicilian restaurant. And that becomes a community hub. So that's why it's so often that trope of some delicatessen. Now, interestingly, the mafia, especially on the East Coast, but in almost every major city, the mafia is deeply, deeply, deeply tied with unions because they provide violence as a service and because they need legitimate enterprises to launder their money through and because they need connection to political power so that they can get away with their more lucrative criminal behavior. Unions were a terrific mark. You can't join the union unless you pay your union dues. When the union goes on strike, the union bosses make sure that nobody scabs, nobody crosses the picket line.
Right.
When some people within the union want to go on strike, but the union isn't going on strike yet, the same people are the ones that make sure that people actually do work.
Right.
And unions, especially under mob control, really devolved just into a form of slavery. Mm-hmm. And we see that throughout this movie. We see them putting people into loans that they don't need, and they have to take loans to get work. If they don't take the loans, they don't get work. And if they don't get work, they don't feed their families. So yeah, I really thought it was interesting how they tied the mafia with the union, which is something that still exists today. I've never watched The Sopranos, but I know that his crime family runs the waste management in New Jersey. And that's true.
Hoboken.
In Hoboken. And it's true. Waste management in New York and New Jersey is still handled by mafia to this day.
That's valid. Like that's factual. Or just families that are associated to like obviously, like if you can prove that there's crime bosses runs, like wouldn't other people know that, and wouldn't they be stopped? So like it's got to all be like assumed at this point. Like,
yeah, and so that brings me to what I mentioned earlier about how they wanted to be close to political power to protect themselves. JFK's father was a mayor of Boston.
Okay.
His father,
JFK's grandpa,
was a rum runner.
Ooh.
The whole family, at least a few generations ago, deeply tied to the Irish mafia in Boston. And this is public secret kind of thing, right?
Gotcha.
Everybody,
right.
Very easily verified. One of these other easily verified, but nobody kind of knows it things, is that because of their mafia connections, they had a lot of union connections. And unions are very powerful voting blocks. Okay, so that's why politicians like unions. Joe Biden courts the steel unions a lot, and the train unions as well. He courts them during voting season, but then in his political candidacy, I don't know if you remember, this wasn't that long ago, the train conductors union wanted to strike, and he passed a law that they couldn't, basically.
Was that after the big wreck out east in Ohio? Like,
yeah, and
because of
the
train track quality and stuff like that. And
yeah.
And
the two are connected, but not directly related. Anyway, it's kind of like this known bit of history, verifiable history, that JFK's father worked with the Italian mafia to get his son elected.
Is it verifiable that they had direct impact on the election, or is it verifiable that they tried to have direct impact on
unions came out in strong support of JFK.
Okay. For the union, for the revolution.
And this is where you get into a lot of like CIA mafia conspiracy type stuff, because one of the big things that JFK did during his administration is he really wanted to clean up Cuba. Well, who was running Cuba at the time? The mafia.
Oh, okay, cool.
Okay, so
some people say the Cuban sandwich guy.
So some people think that the mafia are who made JFK's head do that.
But wasn't...
And then
So he wanted to clean up Cuba. Was that because of the Cuban Missile Crisis, or did that
Cuban Missile Crisis came later.
Okay.
So through his involvement, he helped get mafia out of Cuba.
Okay, just for them to have...
And then Cuba had the revolution, and it's a whole thing.
Wow.
And then...
I've not got that far in my...
The other side of it is that he also, weeks ahead of his head doing that, threatened to destroy the military-industrial complex and clean up the CIA. My theory is that he had Pop Rocks and Pepsi just before the drive. So yeah, there's a long history in America of the mafia, through unions, having a lot of influence in our elections and on our politicians. It's open corruption, and really, it makes sense. The incentive is to control your biggest threat. And who's the biggest threat for the mafia? The perceived legitimate monopoly of force.
Right.
So there's a bit of history lesson and context for this movie.
Probably the first of many conversations coming up about mafia and mob mentality and stuff.
Yeah.
In the next coming months.
Yeah. So the mafia, let's say that the union goes on strike, and if guys went to work anyway, the mafia would go and beat the crap out of them, basically nearly kill them. And they ruled through fear to keep the people from scabbing.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say that I'm an employer and all my guys go on strike, and so I go hire a bunch of day laborers. Well, the mafia comes and beats the crap out of my day laborers. They bang up machines. They destroy equipment.
Mm-hmm.
And there's actually law on the books that protects violence committed as a result of strikes. So, like, it's not even punishable.
Mm-hmm.
So,
it's good stuff, man.
no, it's bad stuff, Jeff.
Oh, it's bad. Oh, okay. I missed.
That's a
okay.
bad thing.
It's bad things. Yeah. Shame on them.
Yeah.
Shame. We know their name. We don't know their names.
Yeah. So, all of this is a result of the legitimate discrimination and issues that these communities faced
Right.
a generation ahead, 2 generations ahead, right?
Mm.
So,
What's that musical? The Sharks versus the Jets. What is that musical I'm thinking of? I've referenced them already. They just recently did like a redoing of it.
West
for
Side
Disney.
Story.
West
I
Side
believe
Story,
one
there
of the
it is.
2 is in the top 250.
Yep, West Side
The
Story.
actress that plays Maria in the new one is playing Snow White. She is Hispanic. Snow White, known for having skin as white as snow, isn't going to have skin as white as snow. I think that's weird. She's a terrific actress, and
Yeah.
she's going to crush it.
Right.
It's just a bizarre casting.
Yeah. I do know one of the actresses from Hamilton's also in that live action West Side Story that's on Disney Plus, which I have not seen.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm fascinated by that type of stuff. I remember I watched, this is a little off topic, but just within this mob conversation of like, I recently watched there's this show on Discovery Channel called Expedition Unknown, Josh Gates.
Nice.
If you listen, Josh Gates, big fan, love to have you on the show. I'd love to just connect with you. I love the stories you're sharing and stuff. But he did a show about some mobsters and then some of maybe some of the hidden loot that he had before his untimely passing and stuff. And I just find that stuff very fascinating.
Yeah.
Like Public Enemies, like that whole idea, like running from the law, but some of them had that Robin Hood mentality of it's just you didn't really see the Robin Hood mentality in this movies per se. Except for the main guy, he eventually had that character arc of realizing that he's mixed up in the wrong dudes, but in general, this wasn't one of those Robin Hood stories where you're rooting for the bad guys.
Yeah.
I'm always interested in what motivates someone to be ruthless, knowing that they are fighting for something.
Right.
But I find that fascinating.
And so these organizations start because the community isn't safe, and somebody needs to step up and make the community safe.
Again, my initial question at the start of this conversation was is this still happening today? And yes, that was. It was kind of a baiting question. Yes, obviously, is it as evident today? Like if you were to go to the streets of New York or go to Little Italy in New York, would you? Is that type of stuff back in the 50s and 60s, or even earlier whenever the big mob days were, it was evident. People knew mob bosses. Are there still people now that have those type of names, that have those type of recognitions as mob bosses, or is it a lot more low key now?
Organized crime has really changed in America over the last few decades.
It's got a lot more digital, right? There's a lot of digital crime that's doing
There's that. It also shifted away from ethnic to racial. The difference being there, it used to be the Irish, the Jews, the blacks, the Italians would all have their own organized crime.
right.
And then it really shifted to just black versus white organized crime. The organized crime among the white communities has gone much more white collar, and the black organized crime has gotten much more violent. In the cities that black organized crime has taken over, white organized crime has really disappeared. Chicago, white organized crime in Chicago, Italian on Irish violence used to be an incredible problem.
Yeah.
Now all the violence in Chicago, still in the same communities, South Chicago and West Chicago, but it's all black on black crime.
Yeah.
I don't know and also Bloods and Crips, which was a big problem in the late 80s, 90s, that still exists.
Yeah.
But it's getting even more and more fragmented over time.
Yeah.
Unreal violence. And it's tragic. Like and all of it, in my opinion, stems back to communities that were underserved by the only organization that could legitimately enforce security in those areas.
Right.
Right. And so the result was illegitimate security in those areas and everything that comes with that.
Right on, man.
And the solution to that is allow additional legitimate security. Right. Like if the Italian mafia had been able to legitimately provide security for their neighborhoods, I think it's less likely that they would have gotten into all of the other criminal behavior that comes with it, in the same way that, you know, beer truck drivers aren't shooting each other today.
Right. Okay. I've got one thing to tell you from IMDb that I found just in my research here. And by research, I mean scrolling through IMDb's facts. That's not only my research, but that's where I start. And I found this little nugget that I thought was interesting. And then we can kind of move off this topic unless you have something else within this topic. But this is from IMDb here. The leading characters were based on real people. Terry Malloy was based on longshoreman and whistleblower Anthony D. Vincenzo. Father Barry was based on waterfront priest John M. Corridan. Johnny Friendly was based on mobster Albert Anastasia. So it's not based on true events, but like taken by inspiration by true characters and stuff. And like people that I'm not familiar with any of these names, but I do.
If you lived in Hoboken, New Jersey, you might have been in the 50s.
Not necessarily, maybe none of the storyline was taken into consideration, but some of the characters, some of the background for some of these people were taken from real people. And I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah. All right. I got some truth claims in this movie.
What you got, boss?
Because we actually haven't done a single one yet.
Not yet. No, I know mine prompt wasn't necessarily a truth claim, but it was relevant.
No, I enjoyed it.
Yeah. What you got?
What's the name of the leading lady?
The actress or the character?
Character. I know it's Joey's sister, but that's all I got. Speaking of Joey, Marlon Brando in this movie looks like a cross between Jason Statham and Joey Tribbiani.
Yeah, I can see that. So the actress is Eva Marie Saint, and her character's name is Eddie Doyle.
Eddie, that's right.
Eddie. Which
Edie or Eddie.
Like at first I'm like,
let's go with Edie.
They're talking about a girl, aren't they? Yeah.
So
Edie Doyle.
I can't even remember Brando's character again. Terry. So
Malloy.
Terry takes Edie out for a drink.
Yes.
She's asking some questions, kind of probing into his history, and he starts, really divulging his rough growing up and how this one group were the only people that really helped him out. And that's actually how a lot of people find themselves in organized crime.
Just needing some help at first, and then
needing some help, needing some safety, needing a community.
Yeah. And then kind of returning the favor, and then at that point you're kind of hooked.
You owe me a favor.
Yeah.
Anyway, after a while he says, "What do you really care, am I right?" And she says, "Shouldn't everybody care about everybody else?" "Oh, what a fruitcake you are. I mean, isn't everybody a part of everybody else? And you really believe that, Drool? You want to hear my philosophy of life? Do it to him before he does it to you." There's two truth claims being made here.
All right, what's the first one? Break it down.
Well, first we've got Edie's.
Okay.
Everybody should care about everybody else / everybody is a part of everybody else. Those are two different claims.
Those are two different. Yeah. So the first one, I don't think it's our responsibility to care about everyone else. So I disagree with that first part.
Yeah. Can you flesh that out? What does that look like? Because we as Christians, we believe
to love our neighbors, to
those that you do to the least of these, you do unto me.
But in that same sense, I think there is a hierarchy of where our needs and our priorities need to be. So I may care about the people that have needs, but like in my everyday to-day life, I'm not thinking about them with every action I'm doing. I'm thinking of my wife. I'm thinking of my daughter. I'm thinking of my mortgage. I'm thinking of
But before all that, you're thinking of me.
No. You're like, if I had to write
I need to reevaluate my priorities.
When we have the wives on the show, we'll talk about that. But it's just like, yeah, I care about everyone in the sense that I want everyone to thrive. I want everyone to have a sustainable life and be happy. But outside of that, my goal in life is not to make sure everyone else is functional. My goal is to make sure that my wife, my kids are set for the future. And then outside of that, if their needs are met, if we're afloat, if we've got our own oxygen masks on, then I'm able to help others. But I wouldn't say like I immediately go, oh yeah, I wake up and I'm thinking about everyone else immediately. No, I'm thinking about, okay, is my family stable? Is everything going on? Then I look to the beyond. So it's not my initial thought. It sounds nice, but it's unrealistic to say that everyone cares about everyone else.
It's impractical as well.
Yeah, absolutely. But the second part,
Yeah.
I do believe we're all connected.
Everybody is a part of everybody else.
I believe that. And maybe it's just my optimistic butterfly effect type of hopeful mentality of just like the small choices I make in my day in, my day out, whether it's how my wife and I budget, how we help others, how we serve at our church, how we help the community. I believe that those impacts can help generations. How we raise our kids can help generations. And through that, the impact is what's the mathematical word? It's
Exponential.
exponential. Like it's kind of that
Orders of magnitude.
pay it forward type of mentality. Like I believe that if I live a life that honors other people, and I'm living a life that puts other people first without actually like neglecting my own family just because I'm trying to help someone else across the street.
Yeah.
Like if I'm living this mentality, just like with every choice I make, I'm making the best conscious decision I can. I believe that makes an impact that's greater than myself.
Sure.
Which is connected to other people. So the second part, I do believe in a butterfly effect type of way. I do believe our actions have immediate effects on everything else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, but what was the second part of that then?
So that was Edie's world
Correct.
claims.
What was the next one then?
And then Terry's response is, you want to hear my philosophy of life?
Yes.
Do it to him before he does it to you.
Mm-hmm. Get while the getting's good.
Yeah, that's part of it.
Yeah. That sounds like the mentality of someone who's come from trauma.
Yeah.
You know, like who their way of survival is offensive rather than defensive.
And you hit a good word there. This is a survival mentality.
Right. Right. I don't necessarily disagree with it. There is a strategy aspect to it that in general probably works. Have the upper hand, always be a step ahead of your enemies. Like that type of mentality, for the most part, that can benefit you, but that's not necessarily going to benefit for the greater good. That may just be a selfish type of benefit where, you know, so yeah, I'm not saying there's wrong strategy in that, but that may not be the most moral, that's definitely not the most moral way to look at things.
Are you familiar with Immanuel Kant?
I am not.
All right. So,
I don't know if I can even spell it.
I can't spell it. K-A-N-T. Kant. German philosopher.
Okay.
One of the central Enlightenment thinkers. He had what he called the categorical imperative.
Okay.
And basically, the categorical imperative is kind of the foundation of what's known as deontological ethical theory.
Okay.
And to put it in very simple terms, would it be okay if everybody did it?
If everyone else was jumping off a cliff, would you do it too type of thing? Or is that a different scenario?
I mean, that certainly falls under it, but more of a, this is a litmus test of, is something ethical?
Mm-hmm.
Kant was, I believe he was anyway, a Christian.
Okay.
But it really does, like, it even provides a secular framework for morality. Let's suppose that I really like your shirt, and so I'm going to take it.
Oh.
My shirt now.
No.
And so I tried to make the argument that theft is okay, might makes right, survival of the fittest, blah, 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 blah. Categorical imperative asks the question, okay, well, does that work if everyone can do it? If everyone can just take because they want, does that work? And as you think through these questions, these certain things devolve,
mm-hmm.
and they don't work if everybody can do it.
Right.
And actually, it's from the categorical imperative that we can conclude that a lot of the things that government does are immoral, because if everyone were permitted to do it, that'd be a problem.
Right.
And interestingly, our foreign policy is largely built off of do it to him before he does it to you. Just recently, the Republican candidates for president, minus Trump, had a campaign event in Iowa. Tucker Carlson moderated. He interviewed each one. And Tom Scott, who a lot of people like, said basically, we need to weaken Russia on the national stage because Russia is a threat to Americans' national security.
Okay.
Also, so is Iran, so is China. This kind of thinking has largely prevailed in American foreign policy for the last 30 so years.
Mm-hmm.
And he says I think it might have been Nikki Haley said, what Russia really doesn't want, what our enemies really don't want, is for us to be energy independent and for us to have a strong military, which is why we need those two things. Well, those two same things are things that we've stopped a lot of other people from having on the basis that would be a threat to us.
Right.
So obviously our foreign policy fails the categorical imperative. We don't think it's okay if everybody else does it, right? So then it must not be moral.
Right.
And that comes back to what Terry says here. Do it to him before he does it to you. I'm sorry, but that's not ethical. Yes, it is unfortunate that I have to be under direct threat, immediate threat, before I return violence, rather than preventative violence. But preventative violence is initiating violence. If I attack you because I think you might attack me in the future, well, I'm now the bad guy. I've started it. So you said that, I think sometimes that this makes sense. I don't think do it to him before he does it to you works.
Okay.
At scale.
Okay. Yeah. And it's definitely not something I would want people to implement, but okay, we've talked about this in this situation of military. What movie was it we talked about?
We talked about it with Braveheart.
Was that where it was Braveheart, where we were talking about
invading York?
Right. The idea of if you know it's inevitable that they're going to continue to attack, why not attack first? That's that same mentality. If it does come with saving your own people, does it make it right if you just do it before they do it? If you're talking about saving the lives of your community that you're fighting for.
Right.
Again, I'm not a proponent of it. I definitely don't think that an eye for an eye is the first thing that people should be doing.
Eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind.
Just in the sense of logic, in the moment of what's going on, there is some strategy.
It's a rational decision.
Right.
It's a rational decision.
Yeah.
But all of it presupposes that you can know for a fact what somebody else is going to do. And you can't. You can have theory, and you can have really good theories on what somebody might do. But if you invade York because you think they're going to invade you first, well, that's
you have to get those peppermint patties.
That's right.
You had to get the peppermint patties.
So if you stab a guy because you think he's going to stab you, and he just unless and even under the threat of violence, the goal first should be de-escalation. Always.
Right. I agree.
Always look for a peaceful solution. De-escalate. Yeah. So that was my big out of that scene. That was the big one.
So in that scene,
yeah,
you see a character who lost her brother.
Yeah.
And a character who was a part of it, who was essentially the bait for that murder. Now, he didn't know it was going to turn into a murder. He just thought he was going to be roughed up.
Right.
So you see two characters, and at this time, he hasn't revealed the truth to her that he was a part of it. And in that conversation, you see two sides of a coin. You see someone who wants compassion, wants this utopia-like lifestyle of can't we all just get along? Can't we all just care for everyone and be positive, and that'll affect everyone? And then you see the other one, and you see that other side of no, you've got to fight to survive. But we get more of Malloy's backstory than we do Edie's.
Malloy.
Yeah. We get more of Malloy's. I mean, he's obviously got more dialogue in the movie. So you get a little bit more of his character. He's a boxer that didn't make it, or like was it an injury that he had stopped, or he
No, actually, it was actually this ties back to Herb Stempel. They were fixing matches, and he had to throw a match,
okay.
and he did it for Charlie, but he hated it. And
So Terry was trying to make choices to survive, versus Edie is trying to think of other people, family members.
but interestingly, like her economic situation is not better.
It's not better, but her choices that she's wanting to make to change her situation is different. What she relies on is different. How she sees people are different. How she views people are different. I think that's powerful. All right, I got a quote here for you. Father Barry's, and this is straight from the screenplay, rapidly with a cigarette in his mouth, he says, "I thought there'd be more of you, but the Romans found out what a handful could do if it's the right handful. The same goes for you and the mob that's got their foot on your neck. I'm just a potato eater, but isn't it simple as 1, 2, 3? 1, the working conditions are bad. 2, they're bad because the mob does the hiring. 3, the only way to break the mob is to stop letting them get away with murder." That was a heavy line. There's so much in that, but the one line that hooked me, and I
Was potato eater?
Well, yeah, I did watch the movie on an empty stomach. That was, like, you don't watch movies, you don't go grocery shopping on an empty stomach. That's just the rules. No, it was the Romans found out what a handful could do if it's the right handful.
Yeah.
It's a simple idea, but it's just this idea, like, it doesn't take a lot of people. It takes the right people. And then Father Barry took that and related it to the mob.
So what do you think is required for the right people?
Having the same aligned vision for what they want the outcome to be. So essentially they're all working towards the same goal. And that could be as simple as a sports team or as a mob. Like they're all in cahoots that they want the same goal. They want something to be accomplished. And I would rather have 2 passionate people versus 10 lukewarm people about something we're trying to get on. You know what I mean? Like that struck out to me. Like, it just the idea of, I think it's more important to have people who are passionate about whatever the cause is, whatever the goal is, whatever the obstacle is, versus just many hands that are unattached to the situation. That's what I pulled from this. And then he goes and talks about, like, you go up against working conditions, you go up against bad hiring,
Corrupt hiring,
and then rule breaking. Essentially, like, people that are playing outside the lines.
Yeah.
It's more important to have people that are aligned with your vision versus just many people. And that's how I interpreted it.
Sure.
But it's essentially, he's talking about the mob mentality. Like, the mob has an aligned vision,
Right.
of power.
Yeah.
They all want to see demise of corporate government, this restrictive, limiting.
Are you saying that I'm part of the mafia?
As I nod my head, yes, I am not saying that, Nelson. No, but just, yeah, I guess that's in the nutshell. That's what
I would argue that the mafia loves this, that there is a state.
Mhm.
The mafia loves government because, and this goes back to Capone and Prohibition, the returns on criminal behavior are so much higher than returns on that same behavior when it's legitimate.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
I also had that in my notes. I think it's a great line. 1, 2, 3. The conditions are bad. 2, they're bad because the mob does the hiring. And we saw that in this movie where Terry gets a job he doesn't deserve because he's connected. That's corruption.
Mm-hmm.
And because he doesn't deserve it, the job's not being done well. This is actually a really great example of the deleterious effects of unions on industry. Monopolies are bad. Everybody agrees. I don't know anybody that's pro-monopoly. Unions are a monopoly on labor. And that's something that people are often loath to admit. But you're giving a single organization the unique right. To do the labor. And this union is giving lower quality labor. the conditions are bad.
Yeah.
And the only way you break the mob is to stop letting them get away with murder. And that's the hard part.
Because just because you make regulations on things doesn't mean people are going to abide by the regulations.
Boy,
So
howdy.
You essentially have to catch them in the act of doing it to stop them. As simple as it is to say, to try to prevent murder, you can only prevent it if you're there in the moment that the action's trying to be had. You know? It doesn't matter what regulations you have in place. You can't legitimately control, which I know you don't like that word, but like you can't monitor that unless you're there in the moment that you know something's going to go down. It's hard to fully eliminate that mob type of idea.
I need you to elaborate. You said it's the thing I don't like. I need you to take a step back and go over it again because I missed it.
I said that line about control, just like how you don't like how government controls or dictates a lot of minor things that in our everyday life.
That it has no business doing.
Right. So
yeah.
But in general, like,
is it that you can't enforce it?
Right. You can't enforce the prevention of murder unless you're there at the time when someone's trying to murder.
Right. Yeah.
Like you can have rules. Obviously, murder is illegal. There's punishment for it.
Yeah.
But you can't eliminate it just by saying murder's bad. Whereas like prohibition, again, I'm not pro prohibition, but like it's easier to go no drinking and then go, okay, we're shutting down all distilleries, all breweries. Like obviously things, underground stuff happens, but in general, there's an easier action to be taken when you go no drinking. Okay, shut down all drinking making facilities.
Yep.
Make it harder for them to drink. Whereas specifically for murder, you can say don't murder, but you can't shut down murder things.
Yep.
So that is a hard thing to shut down. And the mob, based on, there's hitmen and connected to that stuff. Like that's an aspect that you can't really shut down ever.
So
like, how do you completely
in libertarian circles, there is a saying, the state is a mafia disguised as a humanitarian organization.
Okay.
Based on what
it's a legal mafia.
A perceived legitimate mafia.
Yeah. Okay.
Based on what we've seen in this movie, what we've talked about with this movie, what would you say the difference is? Because you are more prostate than I am.
I haven't seen my prostate ecologist in a while, or whatever the doctor is.
Prostate ecologist?
Prostate ecologist.
One of my favorite lines in the movie, Patch Adams, is, hey, how'd you do in proctology? Pretty good. Why? Can you deal with that hole for me?
That is a great movie.
Yeah.
That is
not in the top 250 though.
No, it's an emotional movie.
Yeah.
That movie will wreck you. Anyways, ask me again.
Yeah.
Ask
so
me again.
You are more comfortable with the idea of a state than I am.
That's correct. Yeah.
What would you say is the distinguishing factor between a mafia and a state?
Okay, hold on. This is that processing that we were talking about with Sheldon and Nate. Yeah. On the spot processing here. Obviously, you'll trim this up. Give me a second.
Of course.
In my mind, in my optimistic view, when I'm trying to think that the government does have my best interest in mind, which I know that's not necessarily the case, but I try to have a hope in it because it exists. Because it's there, I'm going to hope that they're doing the best thing. So with that in mind, I would hope that the government, the state, is running through all of their specific structured organization that's there in place to keep people in check. Again, there are... I'm already finding faults in this because I don't necessarily trust every aspect of the government, but in general, in my optimistic view, if there's things in place that keep people in check, that they kind of checks and balances in general, essentially, that allow things to weed out the weenies, essentially. Whereas, again, that's my optimistic view. I know that's not always the case. The government is far from perfect, but in the comparison to the mob/mafia side of things, of like, what's the difference? From my vast experience with mafias, I feel like they've got more of the mentality of punch first, check the stats later, check the stats second. Like make an action first, then verify if you've made the right choice. Where the state is check, double check, verify, check. Spend a lot of time just verifying. Spend time in the paperwork. Spend a lot of time shaking hands, changing papers, making sure we've got our, I's crossed and our T's dotted, then making a decision. So like that, if I just on the spot here, if I had to answer, like, I feel like that's the thing. Like, whereas from what I perceive the mafia to be, they're more like, this guy, we got to take care of him. Do it. Just like no questions asked. Whereas the government's like, I feel like there's more questions asked with the government. Did that make sense?
Yeah. So,
okay.
In your perception,
yes,
the difference between legitimacy and illegitimacy is the quantity of paperwork.
Right. The hoops that have to be jumped through to get the same potentially output done, obstacle or action resulted done. Yeah.
Okay.
I know that, there's many stories of past government stuff, and I assume that it's probably still happening today in modern day. But like, I know there's things happening.
Don't worry. The FBI and the CIA assure us they've fixed it all.
It's like, I know there's dirty things happening within the government, but I just feel like there's more, just like we saw in Ford versus Ferrari, there's more people passing that red notebook around before something gets done versus in the mob, it's just, you do this, don't ask any questions. That's how I perceive it, from what I'm receiving in movies. Would you agree, disagree? Like, what's your answer to this question?
I see the only difference between the two is the perception of legitimacy.
Okay.
And the only difference between the perception of legitimacy and illegitimacy is who's got the bigger stick. I think that's the only difference here.
Yeah, and sometimes that stick changes hands. Like sometimes there is we've got the advantage versus When I say we, I meant the mob. I'm not a part of the mob. I have no association to mobs.
Now the nice thing about the mafia, like there are reasons that I prefer the mafia to the state. One of them, there is no
unions.
No, there are unions.
Oh, they are unions. That's right.
That I'm aware of. The mafia does not have a habit of confiscating weapons from the people that it nominally serves.
Right.
That I'm aware of, the mafia does not have a habit of trying to pretend that what it does is legitimate. That I'm aware of, the mafia doesn't put on airs about what its role is in its community.
Okay, yeah. There's some from mobsters in the past. There's been some showmanship. With some of them.
Showmanship, I'm fine with.
Yeah, okay.
Showmanship, I don't mean showmanship. The mafia doesn't try to convince the people that it's legitimate.
Got you. Okay, they're not out for public opinion.
No.
Yeah.
Now,
I'd agree with that. Yeah.
Because they're illegitimate, and because they don't put on airs about that, they actually they dump a lot of money into community involvement. They want the people that they protect to like them, because, as Father Barry pointed out, 3, the only way we break the mob is to stop letting them get away with murder, and the only way they get away with murder is if the people that are in the community they work in like them enough,
right,
or are scared of them. But it's both.
Yeah.
If they get scared enough, they rat.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree with that.
Now, do I like the mafia? No. Right.
Wink, wink.
No, wink, wink.
Why'd you just wink at me then, Nelson? I'm just kidding.
I dislike them. I think that they are micro states of sorts.
Yeah. They're also bodies that are trying to govern people.
Yep. But also they're providing a service that people want, otherwise they wouldn't exist.
Right. I agree with that. Yeah.
And the same can be said about the state. The state is providing a service that people want. I just think that service works better when subjected to a market.
Mm-hmm.
Like any other service are good.
Right.
Do you have any? I've got one more.
You got one more.
I got one more. You got one more?
I got one more.
Rock, paper, scissors?
Sure.
Rock, paper, scissors, shoot, or rock, paper, scissors?
Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. Just, because of guns and violence.
Okay. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot.
Okay, Nelson, you go first.
Yeah.
He actually pointed a gun at me.
Yeah.
A handgun.
A
gun,
real
handgun.
A real handgun.
A real gun made out of a hand.
Terry to Edie. What's with Father Barry? What's his racket? His racket? Yeah, his racket. Everybody has a racket.
Oh, that was it.
That was it.
Clearly, they're talking about tennis.
Right.
Yeah.
Or pickleball.
Pickleball or badminton.
Yeah. It's not bad. It's goodminton.
It's goodminton. In that context, can you elaborate a little bit more? Like, what was going on in that conversation? I don't remember this quote specifically.
Yeah, so
were
Edie's
they
trying
talking
to
about?
convince Terry to go to Father Barry and to turn on the mafia.
Okay.
And she's trying to convince him Father Barry's a good guy. In fact, I thought there's like late on, there's a scene where Father Barry comes into the bar and is smacking Terry around. I thought in that moment we were going to get this reveal of a heel turn from Father Barry where he's actually in with the mob. Didn't work out that way.
That would have been a cool twist, though.
That would have been a cool twist.
That would have been a cool twist. Maybe in the remake.
Yeah. Basically, in this scene, Terry's saying everybody has a game they're playing. Everybody's got a racket. And what's Father Terry's? What kind of man is he? To go back to Lawrence of Arabia.
Everyone has a racket.
Do you agree with that? Or is this part of survivor mentality?
I guess I kind of agree with it. I think it's just the way I'm interpreting this, like our racket in this sense is our skills to survive. Or would you not interpret that way?
No. I guess maybe an explanation of what rackets were for mafia.
Okay, yeah. I just thought it was like a metaphor to like everyone's got the tools they need to survive. Okay,
No.
I'm missing this then.
So like racketeering is when an organized group are rigging the system in some kind of way. So for example, if you're running numbers for boxing matches,
Like I do.
but you're fixing matches,
Right.
that's a racket.
Okay. You're taking people's bets, but you also know the odds already before you. Okay.
Yeah.
Racketeering. Okay. So everyone's got a racket. So everyone's got a manipulation in the system.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Everybody's trying to cheat somebody is what this comes down to.
Okay. Okay. I'm with you now. No. I think there's seasons in our lives where like we have stints of being manipulative or being like amoral. But I don't think it's safe to say that everyone has something that they're using to use as an advantage to get above other people. Not everyone's playing dishonestly. Everyone has their crutches. Everyone has their things that their vices. But some people's vices have nothing to do with interaction with other people. Now, some people definitely use it to their advantage and use it to manipulate, use it to use and abuse. But yeah, I don't think it's safe to say that everyone's out to just get their own and out to see the defeat of others. If you're coming from the mob mentality, I can see how that's how you perceive people.
Yeah.
I can see how people can have that perspective. It's definitely not something that's on another planet. Like it's definitely, I can see people having that idea, but I don't think that's safe to say that everyone is out to manipulate someone. My answer is no, Nelson.
Yeah, and I think this comes back to the do it to him before he does it to you.
Yeah.
If that's your mindset,
Yeah.
then you have to assume that everybody's out to get you.
Right. Yeah. And it makes sense for this movie setting and where they're coming from. But yeah, I just in general, soccer moms are not out to.
No, they are. Actually, that's the exception.
That is the exception. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't hang around with too many soccer moms.
That's it's in your best interest not to.
Soccer grandmas, though.
Oh, Saints.
They're great. They're
Salt
great,
of the earth.
great people. Yeah. It's that next generation that changes you.
Yeah, of soccer.
Soccer. All right, my last quote here. And this one takes us to a spiritual side of things, which we haven't talked too much about the spiritual aspect of this movie. There was a lot of Catholicism references and stuff, and a lot of it wasn't a spiritually focused movie, but Father Barry was a prominent figure in this movie, and there was times where you were questioning his moral standing in some things and stuff. But
there was a lot of morality in this movie without being a lot of theology in this movie.
Correct, yeah. So Edie and Father Abbey are talking, and Edie says, "Don't turn away. Look at it. You're in this too. Don't you see? Don't you see? You're in this too, Father. Father Barry says, Edie, I do what I can. I'm in the church when you need me. Then Edie goes, I'm in the church where you need me? Was there ever a saint who hid in the church? That's a convicting line. I'm not in the idea like I don't perceive myself as a saint, but I do perceive myself as someone who is trying to continue the ministry of Jesus and trying to spread the gospel and trying to build the kingdom. I try. I'm trying. So I don't see myself as a saint, but I see myself as someone who's working for the kingdom. I know those are different things, but in general, like, and this idea of like, was there ever a saint who hid in the church? It brought that spiritual idea of like, you can't make a difference, whether it's for what you believe, faith-wise, moral-wise, politically, environmentally, ecologically. You can't make a change if you don't get out of the room you're in and start networking, start communicating, start spending time with people, start immersing yourself in things.
Right.
And specifically with spirituality, you know, like as Christians, we're called to disciple. We're called to, you know, spread the message of God, love our neighbors, love others. And we can't do that if we never leave the comfort of our own couch.
Sure.
You know, we're called to be a part of our community. You know, not everyone's called to go to a third world country. You know, I'm not. I couldn't handle it. I'm grateful for the people that do it, but just in general, like we're not called to just barricade ourselves in and hide it under a bushel. No, you know, like
I'm gonna let it shine.
Right. Like it's just like that hit me in a spiritual level of just like, that's right. Like saints made moves. Saints had action. Saints made waves. Saints pushed buttons. Saints challenged the status quo. And that, so just like, I just appreciated that line of just like that little nudge to like, you can't do stuff sitting on your arse, you know?
Right.
Like that was powerful. Like for me, that was the most spiritual line in this movie that I picked up on.
Sure.
Faith, theologically convicting, just like you can't make a difference if you hide in the church. You can't hide under the cover of the church. You have to be a part of the people. You have to immerse yourself in what God has called us to be a part of.
Yeah. You and I are not Catholic. We're not steeped in Catholic history. We don't buy in on the veneration of saints. So I asked ChatGPT, was there ever a saint who hid in the church? Yes, several.
Thank you, Chat.
So to list, we've got Saint Maximilian Kolbe, Saint Martin of Tours, Saint Athanasius of Alexandria, Saint Elizabeth of Hungary, Saint Thomas Becket, Saint Joan of Arc, and that's just 6, but there's a lot.
Right. That they're all acknowledged to have hidden the church
at some point.
Interesting.
Now, if you kind of look through the history of these people and why they were hiding in the church, it was always seeking sanctuary from persecution.
Yeah. Which is...
And actually, that happens in this movie.
Yeah.
They meet in the church, in the basement.
Yeah. And then you see them get persecuted within the next couple minutes of that.
That's right. So...
persecution-esque.
I get the sentiment. If she were raised Catholic, she should have known better. If he's a Catholic priest, he should have had a quick answer for her of like, well, yeah, here's a bunch of examples. But really all of that just to say, like, I agree with you. I agree that the church is its most effective when it's doing outreach, not cloistering.
Yeah. Saying that, like, I don't want people to presume that, like, I've not cowered under the fear of persecution.
Sure.
And I think that's why I was convicted by it.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not assuming the role of a saint, but I am assuming the role of someone who's taking on the responsibility of being passionate and being outspoken about something I believe in. You know?
Yeah.
And so that's why it struck me. It was like, there's been many times where I've not said something. I've not raised my voice. I've not spoke up. I've not talked to someone. I've not went to an event. I've not stood up in the middle. Just like, there's been many times where I've not done something in the fear of what people thought. And some of them happen to be in the building of a church. You know, like, faith requires risk.
Yeah.
Not risk in like what we believe in, but risk in like, are we willing to step out and risk what other people are going to assume about us.
Right.
Like, there is no risk, in my opinion and in my beliefs, about putting your faith in Jesus and fully walking in confidence about what he's set out for us.
Okay.
I don't believe there's risk in that. For me, the risk is the court of public opinion.
Yeah.
And many times have I cowered under that.
Yeah.
Guilty. And I'll probably do it again in some aspects.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things, in government and social media. And I mean, obviously, anytime something happens, Roe versus Wade being overturned, like everything where it can be faith adjacent. There's an aspect to have an opinion about something. And, do you say something? Do you not say something? Do you just watch and observe? Do you join part of whatever's happening? Like, do you join the conversation? Like,
I think at minimum we need to take the Alexander Solzhenitsyn live not by lies.
Mm-hmm.
Refuse to say the thing that you think is untrue.
Refuse to say the thing that is untrue. Yeah, no, I like that.
You don't have to be on the front line being the most outspoken against the thing you disagree with. But you ought to refuse to say the thing that you think is untrue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that was the last thing that I'd had, and that was it was a very personally impacting line for me. That was it was challenging, and I appreciated it for the challenge that it brought.
Wrap up?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. Overall, did you like the movie?
I did.
Okay. Would this be one you'd watch again?
I would.
Okay, I would too. It's not high up there for me, but I did enjoy it. Over some of the older movies we've watched, I was definitely engulfed in this and invested, and I appreciated it. There was cinematically
choices that would be done differently today.
And mostly for me, I found some of the soundtrack, the orchestral stuff, to be a little bit harsh in some moments, like a little bit more like brash.
Sure.
Compositions were a little different back in the day and stuff. So, but overall, I enjoyed it. It was a great movie. So, I mean, the first question, would you recommend this movie? Would you?
I would.
Yeah, I would too. I can't, it's not going to be the first one I go, oh, you need to watch On the Waterfront.
Of all the Brando movies I've seen, it's my favorite.
Same here. Yeah, it's my number one Brando movie so far.
Yeah.
But no, I enjoy it. And I thought he was great. He was a captivating character.
Yeah.
Yeah. Specifically for him alone, I would. The story itself, nothing super unique about it, like a character that's deciphering between the group he hangs with versus a group that he's attracted to, or has a desire to seek acceptance in.
Right.
But also being, trapped in something, a situation. It's not a unique story, but yeah, overall, I would absolutely recommend it. If it came up in conversation and stuff. Would you change the rating? It's approved. Do you approve it?
I think maybe a better question when things are approved or unapproved is, what would you rate it?
Yeah, I like that. Which I think we've asked before.
Yeah. PG-13.
Yeah.
And that would, if you were to do this today, it would look a lot different. It'd probably end up being R.
Yeah.
But I think
there's no language.
No.
There's imposed violence, and there's some roughed up guys, but the gore or like the scenes aren't super graphic.
Yeah.
But
I think the subject matter is too complex for a PG movie.
Right. But there is murder. I would definitely say PG-13. I would agree. If it was done in modern times, though, it would absolutely be R. Has it aged well?
I think it's aged really well. It works out to be a period piece of sorts, though.
How so? It's
set in the 50s. It was made in the 50s. The dialogue's very 50s. Like everything about it's very 50s. It's less period piece, more time capsule, I guess.
Yeah. 1954, and it was set in around the time it came out. Yeah. Yeah. I don't remember the 50s too much, but yeah, I think they captured a lot of it pretty accurately.
It's exactly how I remember it.
I love you, Nolan. Nielsen.
Yeah, I remember the 50s in black and white.
Man, yeah. Isn't it fascinating growing up? So I remember looking at pictures of my dad as a kid. My dad graduated high school in 72.
Okay.
So he would have been 18 and he would have been 18 years old in 72. His senior picture is in black and white.
My dad's senior picture's in color.
Like,
and it was 80.
So
80.
And I know obviously
think.
there was color photos, but just the one that we always would come across when my mom was doing was a black and white photo of my dad from his senior year. And
right before he went to Nam.
Right. No, he didn't. My dad did not serve in the military. My dad was on a bowling league though. So there's that. He's a pretty good bowler. He's actually a very good bowler.
What was the name of the bowling league? The team he was on?
It was the Steiner Lumber League. So Steiner Lumber was the sponsor of their team.
Yeah.
He had a Steiner Lumber shirt and all that
What
stuff.
was the team name?
Steiner Lumber. They didn't have a name. It was just Steiner Lumber.
Okay.
Yeah, their shirt was just Steiner Lumber.
Nice.
Which is a lumber company in Shreve, Ohio.
Yeah.
And great guy, Chris Steiner, great guy. Shout out to Chris. He'll never listen to this episode, but great dude. I worked for him a couple of years when I was in junior high. Great dude.
Still doing lumber?
Yeah, he owns one in Smithville now, Smithville, Ohio. He owns 2 lumber shops.
He needs billboards that say "Got wood."
Yeah, so I would say, I wouldn't want it to age anymore. I love that it. I think you said it right. It's a nice time capsule. This movie could have been done in color. They had the capabilities.
Yeah,
of color.
and they chose not to.
They chose not to.
Probably saved a lot of money on it.
Yeah, it's one of the older movies that I'm glad there's an older movie that I can say I enjoy. Because so far,
You liked Psycho.
Yeah, you're right. Let me look at my list real quick.
Yeah.
So I did rate this under, in my personal rating system that I'm doing, I did rate this under It's a Wonderful Life. So I did enjoy that more than It's a Wonderful Life.
And this is
that was 1946. This was 1954.
Yeah, this is newer.
This is newer. So It's a Wonderful Life, Psycho, and On the Waterfront would probably be, of the older movies we've seen, my top 3 of the older movies.
And there's a reason that they're still on the top 250.
Yeah. Now, as I make my list,
Yeah.
obviously this conversation we'll just continue to have this as we watch more movies. I don't know if this one will make my top 250 as I add more movies.
Sure.
Because there's a lot more movies out there that I know I enjoy more than this. I don't know if there's 250 more, but I don't know if it'll make my top 250 to get into our last question. But I enjoyed it. I would definitely watch it again. And I think I like the age that it has on it. So as of right now, I would say this probably would be in my top 250, but it'd be close to the bottom. What about you? Would this be in your top 250?
I don't think so.
Okay.
But I did like it a lot, and I would recommend it.
It was a good movie. I'm really glad I enjoyed it, and I wanted to enjoy it, and I did.
There you go.
I was optimistic going in, and I was optimistic going into Lawrence Arabia too, and that one was
a stinker.
That one was just dry
because of the desert.
Because of the desert, yeah. It was. Yeah, I was dehydrated the whole time.
Probably shouldn't have eaten that sandwich.
Sandwich, yeah, lots of sandwich. Next week.
Yeah.
Wait, is anything else before this movie? Before I get into next week's episode?
No, sir.
All right. Next week, we have a very special. I mean, all of our guests are special. And I think once we finish an episode and we move on to the next one, we just, they become the next special ones. Not to trump it, I'm battering at this point, but I'm very grateful. This is a good friend of both of ours.
On a very special episode of Silver Screen Biases.
Yes. John Grandy will be joining us for the movie Gladiator.
That's right.
Yes.
I had 5 or 6 youth pastors, and he was my final one.
Mm-hmm. So he was the youth pastor for your senior year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He sent me off.
When I first came to the church that we now attend,
yeah,
he was the first person I made a connection with. And since then, he's just been a prominent figure in my life as someone I look up to. And we're not far off on age.
No. And he moved away a few years ago.
Right.
And we'll have him in remote, and we're really looking forward to having him on.
But I'm excited. I haven't talked to him in a while, so I'm excited for our conversation. We have not filled that episode as of this evening.
And he won't hear any of this until after that episode's recorded.
Correct. So, I don't even know if he listens to our podcast.
He may never hear this.
He may never hear this bantering of him. But yeah, Gladiator, Russell Crowe, Joaquin Phoenix, Ridley Scott. Join us next week. And I We say this every now and then. We're coming.
Bye.
We're Thanks for listening. We had a great time putting this together for you.
To join the conversation, find us on Facebook and Instagram at Silver Screen Biases.
And on Twitter at Screen Biases.
We believe in value for value, so if you found value in our show, we ask you to consider supporting us.
Links to our social media and support can be found in the show notes.